Thursday marks the 6th China Poverty Alleviation Day, as well as the 27th International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. With a population of nearly 1/4 of the world's total, China has done a lot, and Xinjiang in northwest China is no exception. According to the local government's data from 2014 to 2018, over 2 million people have been lifted out of poverty, and the poverty rate in rural areas in Xinjiang has dropped from 19% to 6%. Evidence of major development also shows in the education and healthcare sectors. So what's triggered the transformation? What's the relationship between poverty alleviation with fighting terrorism in the region? Joining me for the discussion here in the Beijing studio are Dr. Wang, postdoctoral researcher at the Institute of Law at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, and Einar, Tangen, current affairs commentator. Welcome to the show. So, the director of China State Council's leading group office of poverty alleviation and development, which is the Chinese government's top office for poverty alleviation, said last week that by the end of last year, 95% of China's current poverty-stricken population will be lifted out of poverty. How big a part of all of that is in Xinjiang, Dr. Wang?
China as a state, we set up a goal. In 2020, we will to eliminate all the absolute poverty in China. And so now there's a huge process goes on. In Xinjiang, we can see the numbers tell the story.
2 million in 4 years.
Yeah, and it's a long journey for Xinjiang. It's always been an underdevelopment area in China. But right now, I think Xinjiang is prepared for the future development.
So in terms of overall development, in terms of starting point, where was Xinjiang in terms of socioeconomic development? I understand it has been relatively lacking on the list of all the 34 provincial level regions in China, right? What is your understanding of it?
Yeah, because Xinjiang is, when we talk about Xinjiang, Xinjiang is a really big area. And also because the diversity of the culture and also the economic situation, especially in south of Xinjiang. And the population is huge, but the land for agriculture is very small. And there is basically, it used to be basically no industrial. Right now, the things keep changing with education goes proof and also the infrastructure goes proof. So I think the things getting better.
According to Shohrat Zakir, who is chairman of the government of Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region from 2014 to 2018, as I said, 20 million lifted out of poverty. In 2017, the region allocated nearly $880 million in fighting poverty, and last year, 2018, the number was nearly $980 million. So, Einar, according to your understanding, what does that mean in the determination of the Xinjiang government, local government, to fight poverty, and why do they place so much resources in doing that?
A lot of it is just because China is a socialist state. I mean, it's not just Xinjiang local provincial government. They have been backed up by the central government. This has been a goal. And there's been a kind of a up and down policy towards Xinjiang. There are times when they were trying to be very tough and keep things under control. Other times they tried to use the carrot and try to move things along. But there was a real a situation that was happening which was very difficult politically. There were a lot of families, Uyghur families, in the very impoverished areas in the farming communities, were not sending their children to school. They would keep them home, they would teach them the Quran, but the difficulty there is they were having more than one child. They were allowed up to 7 children during a time when the Han majority was only allowed 1. And they saw this as kind of like a free river. This is what happens in a rural area. But these kids had no future. They could only stay on the farm. They didn't learn enough about science. They didn't speak Han Chinese. Pudonghua, and they couldn't write the language. So their ability to get jobs outside the rural area, which, if you start looking at the numbers, you have 2 parents and they have 7 kids, dividing up the land, very, very critical.
Wang, Dr. Wang, is that what the situation is according to your observation? You grew up in Xinjiang. For these areas, why there has been such poverty, especially in the rural areas and especially among ethnic minorities?
Yeah, because you can say Xinjiang, well, for the ancient China is a crucial place for the Silk Road. Even that become like a transport channel for goods and also the channel for different culture. But considering Xinjiang is a big area, it's 3 times bigger than France. So south of the Xinjiang, which is near the desert, to actually have a difficulty to develop the economic. And also that is a place the most ethnic majority living in. And
where the concentration of ethnic minorities are particularly strong, let's say. So is that also where poverty rate particularly high as well for Xinjiang? So how did the Xinjiang government manage by, for instance, eliminating poverty, poverty among 2 million people in 4 years? Exactly what was the key?
I mean, this be the of the Chinese experience. We value about education. We value about the infrastructure, because considering the size, Xinjiang was building the really significantly like highway system, and also many of the airport has been built. And also
so infrastructure.
Also, if you're thinking about south of Xinjiang, it used to be just always very limited land to farm, but right now is you find a different way to develop the economic. Also, like people travel to Xinjiang, it's quite a lot.
Tourism,
yeah. And also, you know, thinking about the VW is building a car infrastructure in Xinjiang. So it's a new factory.
Yeah, but you know, you have to acknowledge that that's being pushed by the central government. It's not that VW said we need to build a car factory in the middle of the desert. There were policies that were given to them. And while we're talking about economic development, remember that this has been mirrored in terms of life development. The number of years that a person in Xinjiang can live now is close to the national average, about 68 for men. I mean,
66 is the average, let's say.
But the issue there is that along with this economic development has become a quality of life quotient that has to be recognized as well.
Let me make this absolutely clear. Is this kind of development opportunity equally shared among people from different ethnic groups, or even tilted towards ethnic minorities? Because anyway, Han people are relatively advantaged, you know, because they understand the language.
Not in Xinjiang.
Not in Xinjiang.
No.
Okay, what is the situation there? I mean, these kind of poverty alleviation efforts, how beneficial are they to other ethnic minorities?
Now I think it's quite equal. It used to be because the low education level and you know, they don't really speak Han Chinese, which is a universal language of this state. So they have quite a lot of disadvantage when they face in the job market. But right now, with central government putting investment in the education area, I think they're catching up.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in terms of the actual money, when we started talking about the 888 million, the bulk of that money is going into these impoverished areas, which are mainly inhabited by ethnic minorities.
Yeah. How much connection, or what is the relationship between the poverty alleviation efforts and what Xinjiang has been trying very hard, which is to eliminate violence, let's say, whatever you call it, unrest or terrorism? What's the relationship between these two sides, Dr. Wang?
I mean, it's just to give the fundamental change on this area. It's because if people have low education level and they have like very vulnerable when they're facing about terrorism and especially extremism ideology. But right now, when people do get enough education, which in Xinjiang, I mean, in whole China, we get Chinese citizens get 9 years free education, but in Xinjiang, you got 12 years. That do improve a lot.
So which means people can send their kids for 12 years for free.
In Xinjiang.
In Xinjiang,
yeah.
which
but
is
only
really
9 years in the rest of China.
Only 9 years in the rest of China. But some people would say, okay, they're forced to study Han Chinese, you know, the Putonghua, but then they're forced to abandon their Uyghur language. Is that the case? Can you assure our audiences that that is not the case, that they're allowed to use their own language, that they're allowed to study and speak their own language?
No, I mean, what the Western media says is basically just not true. Because in Xinjiang, in the middle school or even since the kindergarten, you have two crosses, which is one is Han Chinese, and you study the universal language, and also you can study whatever your own language, of course, just can go through together.
And everywhere in Xinjiang.
Everywhere in Xinjiang. And also for the Han Chinese student in Xinjiang, you also need to learn some of the local language, maybe not that so much, but a little bit, and also to learn their culture, local culture.
Can you speak any dialect from the ethnic minorities?
I mean, I finished, I lived in Xinjiang quite a long time ago, so I probably forgot.
Okay, you probably forgot, but okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, Einar, you seem to be fascinated by this topic by far. So far.
Well, no, I mean, it is. And part of it is, one of the difficulties in China is the religious aspect of this. A lot of the people adhere to this, especially in very rural, poverty-stricken areas. They cling to their faith because their lives are not great. So China and Beijing has been trying to improve their lives so they have more options. You don't have to worry about being happy in your next life if you can be happy in this one.
Yeah.
And this has been a very important part. But outside China, they're always critical.
But people are allowed to believe in the religion that they want to believe in, so long as they're not going into extremism or
exactly, and this is the
radicalization.
problem.
All right, we have to leave it there. Many thanks to Dr. Wang Jiang and Einar Tangen.